everybody, welcome. Joining me today is Nick Chan Hiu-fung. He's a lawyer and also a Hong Kong deputy to the National People's Congress. And he can give us a legal perspective on so many issues related to Hong Kong. So Nick, welcome.
Jing, thank you for having me.
My first question, because I think not many people in the Western world know that actually every year we have deputies representing different sectors, different provinces, different cities, and bring their issues to the national level to being talked about, to being addressed, and also they will participate in decision-making, lawmaking. And of course, we have a team of deputies from Hong Kong representing Hong Kong and bringing issues related to people in Hong Kong to the national level. So I'm wondering, what are the main focuses for the deputies from Hong Kong this year, and what's your focus?
Thank you, Jing. Well, under our constitution, we have the National People's Congress. Today, it's just short of about 3,000 members, of which we have 36 delegates from Hong Kong on this National Congress. So we come from different walks of life and bring with us our diverse life, professional, business, sociological experience, and the people's wishes, voices, dreams with us to this once a year big annual meeting. So naturally, as the people's public servant, we serve, we're dedicated to serve without any pay. We are here definitely to look at the macro perspective and also micro perspective. So what as a nation we care about, and what we as an individual will also care about. So people's livelihood issues, education, economy, inflation that we're facing, COVID-19 situation that we all have to fight against, retirement, housing issues, renewable energy, carbon emission reduction, so on and so forth. So it is a very broad range of issues that we focus on. As we get together, we we look back into our collective accomplishments as a country last year, and we set our goals and plans and KPIs from a social, for the setting economic and social policies for the coming year. So it's really important. For myself, as a lawyer with a computer science background, involved in a lot of multinational cross-border technology projects, I'm very keen to look at how we build our data infrastructure, how we continue to roll out the 5G system so more people could use it, a smarter city, smarter country, smarter people, how we use AI in industrialization 4.0, and so on. So how we could help, in COVID-19, I'm really looking at how we could do more, save more lives, and also how we can help businesses, especially the small and medium enterprises, how they can have tax reduction as well as better access to capital.
I think you are educated overseas, right? And you have very different backgrounds, computer science and lawmaking. You're a lawyer now. So I'm wondering, can I ask, where do you study? Where do you live? Like, you seem like a very international person.
You're very kind. I worked in the UK. I also worked in Australia, studied in Hong Kong, Australia. When I was young, I also came to do exchange course with some friends and studied in mainland China. So I learned a lot from the culture, the how things work and what people like and how we communicate better. I think that it's helpful, but I'm not the only one in the Congress that's educated overseas, I'm sure. We encourage young people to go see the world and come back and contribute.
Actually, many people, young people in Hong Kong, educated everywhere. Some are educated in Chinese mainland, some educated in different countries. And I remember that I saw an interview from, I think it's from BBC, that because the newly elected legislators, some of them studied in America, studied in UK, very different backgrounds, international backgrounds. But then they are very patriotic to the Western audience because they, in their terms, they are pro-Beijing. So I want to ask you the same questions because you worked and lived and studied in different countries, different cultures, and to many Western audience, those are the Western culture, like free and democratic culture. And how come you like support what Chinese government is doing? You become a deputy to the National People's Congress. That's probably going to be a surprise to a lot of audience in the Western world.
Oh, well, firstly, the Chinese regime is definitely not totalitarian, as some Western media want you to believe. It's democratic, just like the US, UK, Japan, other places are democratic in their own way. In a way, if you compare Hong Kong to some other jurisdiction, for instance, in the US, in the UK, in Japan, for example, there's no universal suffrage in the sense that I see it, in the sense of it's not one person, one vote. It's not the popular vote that gives you your president or your prime minister. But in Hong Kong, we have our own representative democracy. With the recent updating of our laws, and electoral reform, we now have a more broadly representative election committee to help us select the right person to take up that job. It's not an easy job. And I think as an individual, as you go overseas and experience different culture, different systems, all the more you miss home. you want to contribute. I think it's partly in our culture to come back home after you've equip yourself with some knowledge and trying to be helpful and share what you've learned, and so on. And as you live overseas, you see a glass ceiling. Mm-hmm. They call bamboo ceiling or some other ceiling mirror ceiling that they talk about, glass ceiling that they talk about. It's quite true. So you want to remove these inequalities, and in a way, the best place to contribute is back home. Hong Kong, we wouldn't be where we are today without the support of our motherland. And if you look at the so-called democracy that comparing what we have now, what we had before, 1997, under the British rule of 156 years in Hong Kong, we had a governor who's above the law, appointed by the Queen, and he or she, mostly he mm-hmm. As it turns out, is not subject to local law. You can't bring him to trial in local court. And we had issues, difficulties, and basically he's in charge of the army, and also he appoints his own cabinet and legislators, so to speak. Now it's the reverse. So we have much more democracy than we had before. We didn't have universal suffrage, and now universal suffrage is given to us by China, by the National People's Congress. One country, two systems is a creation of the ruling party of China, and it's enshrined and passed into law by the National People's Congress into one of the national law called the Basic Law of Hong Kong. So the Basic Law of Hong Kong is not in itself a constitution. It is a mm-hmm. constitutional document, but it's not a constitution because Hong Kong is not by herself, one country. So I think we are in a much better place than we were before. And, people are happy to see new legislators representing grassroots organizations, communities, representing women, representing, people from different walks of life. So people are happy. And I think another mm-hmm. point I'd like to raise is before the electoral reform, a lot of people kind of question, what does it serve? Why do we need it? I think and people talked about the concept of patriots ruling Hong Kong. I think the way to think about it is, you know, it, the world over, you don't want a government with your own congressmen who are not patriots. They must, at the minimum, serve the people, the good of the people, patriots, before they can get into the Congress. Otherwise, as we have seen in Hong Kong, fortunately, for some years, you have people who misuse the election platform, pranksters, jokers, or even actors, political actors and agents. They come in, they use the free airtime because of, you know, if you run election, you get some free airtime and you get some money from the government, the people's money really, in running election. And people had used those opportunity in that election platform to talk about, you know, dividing up our country, being divisive and obviously not patriotic. It's a complete waste of time you know, they make a monkey out of the election system, and it's terrible. And now we don't have that, so I'm glad to see things are more back to normal.
Like many other countries, like the United States, the United Kingdom have dozens of similar laws related to national security, and it's very normal that any region, any country require only patriots to govern, to rule their country. Who wants traitors to run their countries, right? So, but when Hong Kong has their first ever national security law, the Western politicians, Western media are really trying to paint it as negative as possible. It's like Hong Kong is a doomed place after this national security law. And just a few months ago, we have this first local level legislative council election, the first election after the national security law. And still, Western media try to paint it as negative as possible. But from your perspective as a Hong Konger, as a Hong Kong lawyer, what does this election look like to you? Is it really as negative as what the Western media were saying?
The national security law, it's kind of considered as a blessing, actually, by the local communities, business community, you know, normal, ordinary citizens. They love it. They praise and thank the National People's Congress for passing that law, for instilling back peace and normality in Hong Kong. You can't do business, you can't live your life where people are throwing petrol bombs and so on. And these have changed it. Now, I've looked at law and obviously, you know, spoken with some people about it. And why has it been successful? I think the key is not just the fact that it's narrow, it's not very broad, but why is it still successful? It covers 4 areas, but one of the key areas is against terrorism. We didn't really have a proper law against terrorism. Can you believe that? So some people used to call Hong Kong kind of like the Casablanca of the East, and spy capital of the East, because it's a place without national security law. So you talked about UK or some other countries have dozens of laws. That's true. I understand US, for example, have, you know, over 20 laws on homeland security, national security, so on and so forth, but we don't. So what that means is, what that meant at the time was people could be paid to be spies, people could send money in and to do bad things, to try to break up your country, cause internal strife and civil war, and you can stop them unless and until the money has been received by the individual recipient, and, you know, like a wage. And then if you see it, you could try to freeze that money, because under laws of perhaps all countries in the world, that is money laundering, to be using money from ill-gotten illegal gain. But with the law, what we can now do, what it has done is it has dried up this money will come from overseas for interfering with our normal work, our normal lives. Because if the money is held to be intended for these kind of activities, divide up your country, overthrow your government, terrorist activities, the money could be frozen. Now, all of a sudden, money dried up, I'm told by the enforcers. So that's good. I think it's no, I mean, to make an analogy, I mean, if you are locked up, well, if you want to protect your family, you put on really good front gates, lots of locks on the front gate, but you leave your back door open. It's like that. It's like we have the whole country here with national security protection, but Hong Kong became the back door. That isn't right, right? So I think another point I'd like to raise is um, Western media didn't seem to have explained it well in the following sense. In 2015, mainland China, have already passed a more comprehensive national security law. As you would see in other parts of the world, it protects, nuclear protection, security, food security, economic security. In the U.S., you have, CFIUS review and so on. So have companies left in 2015? If other countries are issuing warnings for their companies to leave Hong Kong because of a national security law that only covers 4 areas, that doesn't talk about economic security, have people left? First, that they haven't. And you talk to local chambers, international chambers, they haven't left. And the reality is, if that is enough to scare them away, so to speak, they would have easily have left in 2015 when the much broader national security law was passed in mainland China. So that's a farce. The reality is the national security law is not a problem for businesses or people, nor does it curtail our freedom. Our freedom of expression, freedom of speech, all that is enshrined in our Bill of Rights Ordinance, as well as under our constitutional document, the Basic Law of Hong Kong, as approved and passed by the National People's Congress. So not to worry.
And also, after all what happened to Hong Kong in the past few years, the protest ended and national security law, we finally have it. After all this, after everything, do you think Hong Kong SAR or China is still an ideal place for foreign investors?
Absolutely. It's an ideal place. It's a globally competitive international city that continues to attract and retain talent. It's not the national security law that's an issue, but we do have a double whammy. We had that people casting doubts, but that's been resolved. But with the COVID-19 situation around the world, it's made traveling more difficult because of our dynamic, zero infection strategy. But the fundamentals are still here. A huge market through Hong Kong as a gateway to China and the rest of the world. You can access a huge market of 1.4 billion people. And what's more, of which 700 million of them are considered middle class. And so they have a great spending power. 700 million, that's almost double the population of the United States. We have a lot more museums, a lot of exchange, art and culture. One of the, maybe the leading, often number 2, but now number 1, maybe overcoming New York, overtaking New York and London as the art trading hub. And we are just a short flight away from all the major jurisdictions in this part of the world. So lots of opportunities. You also can participate in the Greater Bay Area Initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative, and China's Double Circulation Initiative. So, and we welcome people from all walks of life. It's a microcosm, so we welcome everyone.
And I'm wondering, what do you expect from this year's 2 sessions?
I expect good discussions about how we could achieve more together as a nation in the coming year. We continue to improve our plans to defend the world and contribute in production of PPEs and vaccines to fight against different variants of COVID-19. And this year, we would also look at things like, as always, how we can improve access to justice, reduce corruption, cut red tapes, how we could improve the livelihood of people, and advance technology to share with friends from around the world. So I'm excited.
We all know that Hong Kong is experiencing this the worst outbreak, COVID-19 outbreak right now. Every day there are thousands of new infections. Before last month, we saw some footage circulating online that people are actually having a problem being admitted into the hospital. But now the mainland sent a team of experts, doctors, and caretakers to help. We all hope that Hong Kong will recover soon. Are you going to go back to help with this COVID new outbreak as well after these 2 sessions?
Jing Jing, thank you. It breaks my heart to see what's happening with the COVID-19 situation. A bit out of control in Hong Kong. And people emptying the supermarket shelves, and so I thank the support from our compatriots, our friends, our fellow citizens in mainland China, central government, in sending us a lot of support. Yes, I plan to go back right after the 2 sessions. Friends do call me and say, just stay in mainland, safer there. But we have a duty. We should go back because there's a lot of work we need to do in helping to do some coordination at different level, and in bringing and sharing supplies to those in need. And it's often about what they need. It's not just materials, but often support and clarity in information on what is the government planning, how together we can overcome this. Is there a plan, a light at the end of the tunnel? So it's a lot of discussion. It's easier to be there and be accessible.
Okay, thank you so much.